Western Spring Television. Ours it is.
Good day, viewers at home. You're welcome on board Pertinent Questions on Western Spring Television. No conversation about national development can be complete without copious reference to the civil service. The civil service is the harbinger or the nexus for socio-economic development of any society. They are the midwives of socio and economic development. They assist in policy formulation and implementation for the political class. That is the focus of Pertinent Questions today on Western Spring Television. My guest is a seasoned civil servant who just retired anyway. He's a Prince of Mudakeke. It's my pleasure to welcome on board Prince Oyetunde Oyeshiji. Sir, you're welcome on the program.
Thank you, Prince. Thank you for having me. I'm pleased
it's good to see you.
Thank you.
You have retired, but you are looking very young and good. What's the secret?
I'm contented, and I thank God for that. I don't pursue frivolities, so I define my happiness.
I like that. Let's start from that word, contentment. People say contentment was the virtue and the value that the old civil servant had so like a premium price. But today there's no contentment. That's why we have a lot of corruption that's hitting deep into the fabric of society, especially within the civil service. Do you subscribe to that?
Prince, that's a very good observation. But in the course of our conversation, we're going to do a lot of expose into the civil service. Before now, to an average, wealth was a burden. Salaries were paid as I went due. People went on training. So you didn't have difficulty maintaining your family. Children's school fees were paid promptly. But now the story is different, you know. So
what changed the story? Now we have billionaire civil servants. People that can't even account for the sources of their humongous wealth. They are hoteliers, they are industrialists, they are owners of palatial mansions in choice areas, in Lagos, in Abuja, everywhere. What changed?
Nothing has really changed tremendously. You see, but as I did bench, there was motivation. The remuneration was commensurate with labor or productivity. But today, salaries are delayed, pensions are no longer promptly paid, gratuities are no longer promptly paid. So all these affect the fabric and the psychological chemistry of civil servants. The security of tenure, which used to hold them down, is almost no longer there. It's non-existent.
So are you saying that's why civil servants now help themselves when they are in the service? They don't want to depend on the vagaries of whether my gratuity and pensions are paid or not. Let me gather as much as I can before I exit the service. Is that the case?
Not really, but a government is as good as its civil service, you know. So, and there are influences here and there, but any civil servant who chooses to rock the boat does so at his own peril.
The civil service of the old, civil servants of the old were very conservative. They were not these very flamboyant that you see so much opulence and splendor around. Until, I think it changed, the defining moment was 1988, when Decree 48 was enacted by the IBB regime.
Decree 43.
43 of 1988. Tell me about that decree and the havoc or the blessings it brought to the civil service.
let's begin from the beginning.
Yeah.
Let us define the civil service and go into some historical perspective, beginning from the beginning and navigate to the present moment.
Let's go there.
You see, the civil service can be looked at from two perspectives.
Yeah.
One, you can look at the civil service as a group of officers, that is civil servants, who assist the political leadership, as we mentioned in the formulation and implementation of decided policies. But I must say, and I must emphasize that the civil service in itself cannot decide which party wins an election or which candidate. In other words, the civil service must be apolitical, that is non-partisan. But once a government has been legitimately installed or has legitimized its own installation, then the civil service is bound to be loyal. You know. So, but you find that as we cruise along, there used to be three regions: the Western region, the Eastern region, and the Northern region. Within the space of 30 years, we now have 36 states. In other words, we have now, and the basis for the establishment of the civil service is the Nigerian Constitution. Section 169, and I quote, "There shall be a civil service for the federal government of Nigeria." Going down the line means there shall be a civil service for each of the states too.
Yes, sir.
And each of the local government. And that's why we have the three tiers of government, you know, the federal,
the state
and the local. So, just like in all countries of the world, civil servants constitute the engine room, operational engine room for the implementation of decided policies. Decided.
Yeah.
It means even when they assist, that is civil servant, in the policy formulation, they cannot decide for government.
Let's interrogate that policy formulation responsibility of the civil service. A political party has won.
Yes.
Contexted with a manifesto.
Yes.
That it's used as basis to market itself to the people.
Yes.
Before it was given the franchise to represent them or to chaperone over them for the next 4 years.
You're correct.
A civil servant is bound to formulate policies based on the dictate of the manifesto. Yes or no?
Yes. And I give you an example. Now, let's narrow it to Osun State.
Yes.
Civil servants and retired officers who are owed, and the government says, look, I must pay. That's the head of government. The head of government is the governor. He will call his head of service. How can we go about this? The head of service will now gather his permanent secretaries. Who are the accounting officers in all the various agencies of government. I look. The other definition of civil service is the sum total, the totality of all departments and extra-ministerial agencies, MDAs, each charged with specific responsibility, you know. So they will now pull together a harvest of suggestions on how the government can pay. Don't forget, they have been on ground. They have always been on ground. They know the trajectory. So they will now suggest A, B, C, D to government. The head of government will now be at liberty to choose which option he considers best to meet his desire.
Okay.
In line with his promise to a particular class of people, whether civil servants, the market women and men and all of that.
People say government is a continuum.
Yes.
Politicians come, politicians go, but civil servants and civil service.
Amen.
Now, the question now is this. How do we ensure continuity? Is that why we have abandoned projects when the new government comes on board with its own agenda? What is the role of the civil service to serve as the nexus, as the linkage between the old and the new?
Before I expatiate on that, in 1966, Nigeria was without a government for 3 days between July 29th and August 1st. You know, the coup happened on July 29th.
That's right.
And Brigadier Aguiyi-Ironsi was announced on July 1st as the head of the civil servant that kept the unity of Nigeria. Then it means the civil service and the civil servants have a crucial and critical role to play in the sustenance of governance, you know. So, you know, records are kept. You see, the political leaders, ministers, commissioners, they only provide political leadership because not all civil servants can have direct access to the head of government.
I know.
So, but the political leadership, as probably members of the executive council, will now be the voice of the civil servants, you know. And it's the reason that any political leader that fails to hearken to the advice of civil servants will be doing so at his own peril.
Yeah.
And we have seen cases in the past where political, whether commissioners or chairmen of boards of parastatals failed to listen to the voice of reason of civil servants. Some of them went to jail. You know,
I took you off the path that you were toying initially about Decree 43 of 1988,
yes.
and I asked you a definite question.
Yeah.
Let's call it pertinent question now. That decree, was it the beginning of the end of the civil service? Or did it add value, or it devalued the civil service in Nigeria?
If we look at the title of that decree, Decree 43 of 1988, Civil Service Reorganization.
That's right.
It actually disorganized. It was part of the features of that decree is that it rendered the position of permanent secretaries political. That anybody or whosoever the governor or head of government deemed fit to be so appointed will not be accounting officer. So, but you know, the permanent secretary used to be a career officer. Actually, that career, that was the basis for the fear. When I said to an average civil servant, wealth was a burden. He knows, I don't want to destroy my career. I don't want to spoil my family name. I have 35 years. If someone...
What was wrong in making the position of permanent secretary political?
It was wrong because the minister is a politician.
Yes, sir.
The commissioner is a politician. If you now make the accounting officer also a politician, it means it will be easy for them to collude, to connive together, to perpetrate illegality. And when I say illegality, fraud inclusive, you know, because they are members of the same party. And, you know, if at all, the PS was to serve as a check on the SSs, possible SSs, which the political leadership might exhibit.
So the disservice of that decree, 43 of 1988, was that it brought people outside the system.
Yes.
To come and so pretend over the system.
Yes.
So anybody can be so brought from outside the civil service to come and boss the civil service.
Even a primary school teacher could be appointed director general. And the other feature of it is that the tenure of such an officer would terminate with the end of the regime that appointed it.
Yeah.
And it also specified spending limits to officers. For officers in the civil service, I think, if I still remember very well, I think the minister or commissioner could approve any project up to 5 million naira. And I think a director, it was 3 million. But any project above 5 million must get the concurrence approval of the chief executive.
Okay.
You know. But we had...
But at that change now substantially, I've not had a case of people being brought outside the system to come and boss the civil service as permanent secretary. That has changed, right?
It has changed.
Okay. Now we've reversed to the old order.
Yes.
Okay.
But even then, you find that, let me say this, people who are appointed special advisors, executive assistants, were picked from within the rank and file of very experienced officers in the civil service to assist the head of government, who was the governor or president, so that when the head of government leaves, it will be easy for those so appointed as advisors and assistants to revert to their old positions. But later, every Dink and Harry was now being appointed as special advisors, executive assistants, some of which proved.
But special advisors are political positions. Special assistants are political positions. Commissioners are political. As long as it does not touch the core civil service, what's the problem with that? Is that the
I'm
decision...
just telling you the genesis. It has now been abused. If as a career officer, Prince Adefila is considered fit enough to advise the chief executive, when he leaves, you revert to your old position in the civil service.
So you believe that advisors should come from the pool of civil servant, should not be brought from outside?
They can still be brought from outside, but they must be people of proven integrity. Is it because it eventually led to altercation, friction, between the core civil servants?
A school of thought believes that most times civil servants are very conservative, they are bureaucratic in nature, they are very slow, they don't get things done on time, everything must be made with recourse to one order or the other, and people want to get things done immediately. That's why people make recourse to people from the private sector who are brought into government to energize and to speed things up. Why is the civil service that slow?
Even in the private sector, Mr. Adefila, there are there are rules and regulations.
There are procedures
guiding the operation of the civil service.
Yeah.
We have the Civil Service Commission regulations called the General Orders. Now, public service rules
in the civil service.
In the civil service, and it still exists because there's a common saying that where there is no sin, no law, there is no sin. So operational guidelines, even private sectors have that. And I'm sure even here at Western Spring Television, you don't use the rule of the thumb to run this organization.
Yeah.
There are rules and regulations which all staff, members of staff, must abide with.
Yeah, I agree with you. Every organization must be very ethical. There must be ethics. There must be rules. There must be regulations that band or, dictate the direction of operations. What people say is that decision-making process is rather too slow within the civil service. Things get done immediately within the private sector. So, and we see result for that. Do you subscribe to that?
I would still say no. You see, you must get results because in the private sector, when you give responsibility, you fund it.
Yeah.
It is not so in the civil service. And I give an hypothetical example. You are giving a regional manager of a bank directive to increase his revenue from 5 billion a quarter to 25. It must be facilitated. Mr. Regional Manager, what we don't need to facilitate the accomplishment of this new directive, that is, we must increase your revenue base, it will be funded. In the civil service, that is not so the case. Before the advent, at a time in the civil service here, and I'm sure you are part of it, there used to be the release of what was known as running costs, which they call operational expenses in the private sector. So, if you are giving me responsibility and there is no corresponding authority, that responsibility will collapse. Leave bonus is no longer paid on time. If I have to run my office with my salary like I did in culture for 10 years, it must affect efficiency and effectiveness, because those who are to serve as moral boosters. So what is meant to be an incentive now becomes a disincentive. It kills morale, you know. And that's one of the reasons.
So are you saying lack of incentives is the major reason for the low morale and the poor work culture that we see within the civil service today?
It is one of the contributing factors.
How can we make our civil service contemporary? Remove delay, remove sluggishness, unnecessary bureaucratic bottlenecks, so that we get results in the development of a nation in the 21st century.
What you call bureaucratic network was not originally designed to slow down, but to speed up. And I'll give a personal experience. When we were in Oyo State, I was in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. And the chairman of a government parastatal wrote a submission to the military administrator. It was meant for rural development, that civil servants delay actions, that the governor should approve that the fund for his project, since they were funds given by the federal government, called below the line account, that he should remove it. And I had the misfortune of processing the governor's approval. Misfortune is the sense that what he did was improper, because once the governor gave his approval, it took tantamount to mutiny or to overturn it. But I now advise that whether below the line or above the line, the accountant general was the custodian of all public funds, the funds allocated to that agency inclusive. And the governor approved that his earlier approval be reverted. You know, of course, I was invited by the military administrator. He said, you this small boy, you are the one who obtained my. I said, man, if anyone sir. Well, God bless his soul, Brigadier Adisa. He said, if you fail to convince me why I will go to you, I'll make sure you sleep in Nagodi today. I said, I'm sorry, sir. Slip of tongue. And I had to explain to him that the man, what he called bottleneck was to serve as checks and balances.
That's right. So
that he doesn't spend indiscriminately. This man will embezzle money and they will tag the administrator, and you are the chief accounting officer of the state. And you will be embarrassed. You will have succeeded in dragging your name in the mud. You put you on the defensive. He said, he even gave me 1,000 naira.
Wow. Dang.
Yes.
That was a huge amount of money.
Yes. So that was my salary for 2.5 months.
Wow.
Then. So civil servant must be bold, to be blunt and straightforward and honest with the political leadership. Most of our colleagues now are not so courageous and bold to hold the book at the home. And when we get to the concluding part, we'll highlight what could be done.
Okay, thank you very much. I like what you said, that most people in the civil service today are not bold, which is a necessary value for a very diligent civil servant. And I'm going to ask you, when we come back after this break, do you think the best of brain are not being attracted into the civil service? People go into the civil service because they don't have options outside outside the private sector. Viewers, the program is Pertinent Questions, and my guest has been Prince Oyetunde Oyeshiji. We've been discussing public service within the ambit of national development. I'll see you after this break. Thank you.
Aminatu, the legendary Queen of Zazzau, is best known to historians as Queen Amina of Zaria, an old walled town and capital of the Hausa state of Zazzau. Amina was a great warrior and the first woman to rule the ancient kingdom of Zazzau. Her 34 years as queen witnessed an unprecedented expansion of Zazzau by conquests. Queen Amina of Zaria belongs to the class of Amazons by the might of Harami and her strings of conquests. She opened Zaria to trans-border trade and was said to have initiated kola nut cultivation in the ancient kingdom. The Hausa Muslim figure was born in 1533 and died in 1610 at the age of 77 years. Folklores remember Aminatu, the Queen of Zazzau, as a brave, smart and talented leader whose giant statue now adorns the National Arts Theatre in Lagos, Nigeria, while many educational institutions bear her name. Western Spring Television identifies Queen Amina as a watershed character in history.
Welcome back. The program is Pertinent Question, and we have questions on the Nigerian civil service and the quest for national development. My guest is a seasoned civil servant. He just retired as a civil servant, executive secretary to be precise, Prince Oyetunde Oyeshiji. You're welcome back.
Thank you.
Before we went on break, I was asking you, in the days of the old, the best were attracted into the civil service. The days of the likes of Philip Asiodu, J.S. Tucker, Godwin Dabo, and of course Tejumade Alakija, brilliant civil servant. These days, people believe that those who go to the civil service went there out of no other option. Do you subscribe to that?
No. You see, until very recently, Osun State was reputed to possess the highest critical pool of human resources. In those days, in the West to be precise, Western region, during the era of Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Look at those very big legacies that the old man left behind. The Trans family, Trans-this, Trans-that. They were related by civil servants.
Trans were done during Oyo State. Trans.
West.
Well, yeah.
Oyo
State,
Oyo
yeah.
State.
Trans. But proud to that, we had you do a conglomerate.
Which used to have over 150 subsidiaries.
Subsidiary, that's right.
We have none now. Now, I was just a level 8 officer. I'm sorry I'm being personal. And when the Trans International Bank was to be floated, it was my fortune to initiate the Executive Council Memorandum.
Wow.
I had to visit Odushote Bookshop, National Bookshop, and CSS Bookshop to buy books,
wow,
to equip me to be able to
be intellectually ready to write a beautiful memorandum.
So that was the golden era of the civil service we are mentioning. Augustus Adebayo, who later became head of service in the West, was just 32 years old when he became permanent. I left the service at 60. I was not even made permanent secretary.
Yeah.
You know. Olufalaye, Chief Olufalaye, became a permanent secretary in the Federal Civil Service at 34 years. Ambassador Chief Yemi Falumbi became general manager NTA Ibadan at 32. You see, you could see the vibrancy. They were dynamic, young, enterprising, very mobile, very energetic, you know. But those days are gone now. Why? If you look at the constitutional provision of federal character, it should be observed at the recruitment level. When you want to recruit officers into any organization, you have to apply merits. But when you apply ethnicity, favoritism, and all of that, it means your recruitment will be deficient.
Which problem is that? Is that the fault of the political class or the top echelon of the civil service?
I'll say the system. Now, I belonged to the elite group of officers in the civil service, the administrative officers, cadre, and other and special cadres. Before you could be appointed, you have to pass a qualifying examination, after which you go for an extended interview for 3 days before the final stage, which was the commissioner's interview. But now, political consideration is being given to almost all strata of recruitment. And when you promote an officer over and above the level of his competence, you have only succeeded in promoting incompetence. And that's where training and retraining will come in. Regular training and retraining for officers to equip them for higher responsibility. Some officers are promoted over and above the level of their competence. So when they now assume office in the new office, we require higher responsibility. They are not able to meet up with the demands of the new office. Of course, it will tell on the effectiveness and efficiency of such an officer. And don't forget, I said, a government is as good as its. See what happened in the US 4 or 5 years ago during the Trump saga. It was the civil service that prevented him from achieving his aim.
The institution.
The institution. But instead of strengthening institutions here, we strengthen personalities.
That's right.
So that was the reason, major reason Trump failed. Trump failed. The civil service,
in his quest to upturn democratic process.
Yes, the civil service
stood up to him.
Yes.
Now, if you observe these days, hardly do you see a fresh graduate, if he has better options, that he wants to join the civil service. If someone steps out of the university with first class or second class upper remuneration, not so encouraging work environment, or why are people, the young ones, not wanting to go to the civil service?
You see, in the days of old, the best brains were retained within the university community, the first class. They will even ask some of them to proceed to their PhD immediately, you know. The next set, those who made 2-1, and part of those who made first class were in the civil service. We used to have a few people in the civil service in the Baba Banji Oshunkunle, who was permanent secretary in the Ministry of Finance. He studied economics. We had Mrs. Adeniyi. We had the man with the sententious name, Mr. OAAA Fadikwe Gudugba. He studied economics at Oxford University. We had in
the Ministry of Finance.
Yes, we had Baba Folusho Abionu.
Yeah.
Baba.
The former head of service in Osun State?
Yes.
Also Aboba, the first head of service?
Yes.
In Osun State?
Yes. There is a Professor Shayo.
So you had an array of stars?
Yes. The man was a professor of history at UI and made permanent secretary, commissioner for finance.
Okay.
So when he got to the ministry, professors, he was treating submissions to him as if he was dealing with dissertations. They now went on, Mr. Commissioner, if you want to succeed here, the civil service has its own peculiar language and character, which you cannot just ignore.
That's right.
Fortunately, Professor Ayade, incidentally, is our home in Osun State. Baba is from Inisha. He's still alive, I think. God grant him good health in his old age. So, Baba came down to the level of the civil servant and he succeeded. So, when President Obasanjo wanted to establish the National Planning Submission, he has all the 19 states to submit. Oyo State proposal was picked. Consequently, most of the pioneer staff of the National Planning Commission were civil servants from Oyo State.
Seconded to the project.
Yes, very excellent people.
Okay. Now, I thank you very much. Now, let's interrogate this. People believe that the civil service is over-bloated. That there are so many people within the system doing nothing, who are not contributing and adding value to the system, that a job that can possibly be done by 10 people, there will be 40, 100 people doing nothing. Do you think the civil service is like an albatross on government and is over-bloated? And how can the civil service be cut to size to be made effective, dynamic, mobile, and efficient?
Prince, the civil service has a few other features. The civil service is self-regulatory. The civil service also has its own succession arrangement. Self-regulatory because there are rules and regulations guiding conduct and operations. Succession arrangement in terms of sustainability of the system. So you have a director, deputy director, assistant director, a chief officer, principal officer, down the line. That's the succession arrangement. By the time the director will be due
for retirement,
there's already someone on ground to take over from him down the line. But of course, one of the things to improve the system be the introduction of ICT. Not that it will lead to a purge, but it hastens decision-making process. But even though you don't introduce it so suddenly, it will be a condition that those entering the civil service as from X year must be computer literate.
So you believe that the civil service is over-bloated?
I've just explained to you that it's a succession.
Regardless of that, is it over-bloated? Are people employed to do nothing?
No.
Because if a state like Osun expend about 3.5 billion every month to pay the salaries and wages of civil service, don't you consider that rather too not so good, too much? How do we develop other critical sector of the economy? There are roads to be built, there are hospitals to build, there are schools, there are infrastructures.
But do you know that sometimes the political leadership misplace their priorities? 2, where is the present government getting the fund to undertake all the projects and the payments is doing? It was the civil
doctrine of necessity. Let's call it doctrine of necessity. They just have to pay. Because the question you must interrogate, sir, is this. There are people in the informal sector of the economy, the vulcanizers, the bricklayers, those people who have no business in the civil service, and they have equal right, like the civil servant, to the common patrimony that belongs to the state. But they believe that the civil service appropriate virtually everything that comes to the state, and something must be done to have a dynamic, efficient, and effective system that's going to benefit all, without being monopolized by few who are privileged to be in the civil service.
That is a deficient notion. You see, when you pay civil servants, especially in a place like Osun State, now it was the payment made to them that circulates
within the economy.
Yeah. Now, if today Mr. Governor decides he has paid 2 half salaries, I'm waiting for the third, because even without collecting it, yet I've expended it. It goes down
the line.
The issue of, as a matter of fact, before we can develop, that's a different topic. The development of the informal economy will be the beginning of national development. I agree with you. But the civil service does not constitute a drain.
But when we focus too much resources on maintaining an over-bloated civil service, when do we gather enough resources to develop this informal sector of the economy that we just hinted at? Isn't that a problem?
Mr. Adefila, you are putting your hands in my mouth and I don't want to bite you.
Okay.
That's my jurisdiction.
I know. I'm not saying you should cast aspersion on your jurisdiction, on your home. I'm just saying, now you are retired.
Yeah.
As a statesman, which way Nigeria, which way Osun State? Can we continue like this? People say it's only a fool that does same thing, same way, and expect it. They have failed. There are schools that need attention. Hospitals need medical equipment.
What needs to be done? There's no new thing to be said other than what Chief Awolowo did. You know, a government came to us and said, look, every agency of government must generate revenue enough to pay the salary of a staff. Government business is not bread and akara business.
It is what?
Government business, it is service oriented. But what Awolowo did, you just mentioned it, he established the Odua conglomerate. Then there were over 150 subsidiaries, of which we don't have any again. The Trans family, too, Trans Assurance, Trans
Motel, yeah,
Trans International Bank. So those ones, because the Odua and Trans were part of my beats in Oyo State, even up to when we got to
what you just mentioned now, sir. People say it's part of the failures of the civil service. Now, government has no business in business, or government does not make success of any business. Older conglomerate is dead. It's just a name alone. All the beautiful conglomerate, the good work, legacies left by Awolowo, they are nowhere to be found. Ditto with Trans. Every subsidiary of Trans is dead and buried today. That if those things were left at the vagaries of the private sector, they could have survived and succeeded. Is that the failure of the civil service?
I disagree that
management
government
of
has no business. Government has serious business in business.
Beyond creating a conducive environment?
Who are the
management
members of the board of those agencies? They are not civil servants. They were members of the public. You know, if you look at the various boards of those agencies, the chairman must either be someone from the bank or from industry, so to say. So, at a point, I was an ad hoc board member of Osun State College of Education in Ilesha. And the chairman, let me keep his name, he said, Mr. Provost, I have to see your bank statement every week. I want to have an office. Of course, I had to protect the interests of the service. And I told him that he had no such right to have. I said, when you come, if the provost can be so magnanimous, he can allow you access to his office, or at best make the boardroom available to you, then you have no right to scrutinize the expenses of the school. I told him, if you are good enough, you can say, Baba, supply this. You are paid on a monthly basis for what you are doing here. So he was a top-notch politician then. So I just...
And he didn't like that?
He didn't like it. Of course, he sent for me. Said, woman, can you say for Odan Lagbonu? That is, you are
You forfeited my plan.
In my plan. They said, Baba, I'm interested in your success. What legacy do you want to leave? Because, how do I translate it? A king whose reign was peaceful will be remembered the day, because then I had to talk to my other colleagues representing government interests from other agencies, and we were unanimous, so we were able to put him in check.
Now, let me ask this question before we go. How corrupt is the civil service? The belief is that there's always a connivance between the political class and the civil servant. People say no politician can steal a penny without recourse to the civil servant. That civil servants actually aid and abet and show the path of corruption to politicians. Is that true?
Not so true.
But somehow true.
Let me just explain. I've said earlier on that to an average civil servant, wealth was a burden. Before I bought a Mercedes V-Boot in 2000, I was riding a Pajero Jeep. So I had to sell it, got a loan of 200,000, vehicle loan from government, add to the proceeds from the sale of the Pajero. And I told my friends that, look, I can explain the source of my income for getting the Mercedes Benz. But on the contrary, if you have a level 8 officer or level 9 officer who is not the son of Dangote or Deji Adeleke, doing such, it can be questioned, you know. So, but any civil servant, I was telling you that about the genesis of appointment of advisors and executive assistants. Yeah. So a time came that there was friction between when people will even tell you, this is our government. What rubbish are you telling me? see, when the latter administration came, I was among the first crop of coordinating directors. I was at the Local Government Service Commission. And a commissioner he said, the governor has me to supervise your agency. And I told him, sir, where is the governor's authority? I will bring it tomorrow. And I said, please don't bring anything here, because I will convince Mr. Governor to the contrary that you deliberately misled him so as to
give you the role.
Yes.
Mr. Yeshiji, I wish we could have you for a longer time, but my director is on my neck that our time is fast spent. I want to thank you for coming on Pertinent Questions.
Thank you too.
Today on Western Spring Television.
I'm pleased to be here.
And please enjoy your retirement. Okay. But you don't look tired. The state still needs your services. Viewers, it's been Pertinent Questions on Western Spring Television. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. My name is Femi Adefila. Until next week, this is a convenient spot to draw the curtain on today's edition of Pertinent Question. Thank you for watching. See you next week. Bye for now.